don't be worried about it. Just go, because you can come back when that's done. Nothing will have changed when you get back home, because in the scheme of things, 6 months or even a year isn't much. But you'll have had a completely different adventure. And even if you finish there, it's fine. You had an amazing year's adventure, but you never know. You might be in Bilbao 18 years later on a podcast talking about weird places you've been.
Okay, I'm delighted to say that I'm talking to Melissa Thomson. How are you doing today, Melissa?
Yeah, good. Not bad. Thanks.
Excellent. If anyone watching is wondering where I am, having watched the last series, I've managed to get myself a little background. So it's exciting. It's exciting times for series two. But it's particularly exciting talking to you because you're someone we've wanted to have on the podcast for a while now. Just
Oh,
because well, when I was told about your career, it just sounded absolutely fascinating to me. So I had to get you on here and ask about all the places you've been and all the things you've done. So we'll get straight into it. So you graduated university in 2002 and you studied English literature and language, but you didn't have any designs on being a teacher. So what was the plan at that stage? What were you wanting to get into at that point?
it was a little bit of I don't have a plan.
Right.
And I think that happens to lots of people at uni. I don't know why I had in my head that I didn't want to be a teacher, but that just wasn't an intention. And so I didn't have a plan.
Mhm.
So your next question is, what did you do after university? Well, I worked in cafes and bars and restaurants, planless, but having a good
Mhm.
time until I met somebody else who'd done a TEFL course and they were working abroad. And I thought, okay, traveling, I could do that.
Mhm.
And then I kind of made up my mind. I got the money together, working late shifts and tips, um, and I went to Portugal to do a kind of initial qualification, and kind of then I was hooked. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Normally, when people tell me that, oh, I didn't want to be a teacher, it's because their family's full of teachers. Is that the case for you?
No, it isn't actually. No, it isn't at all.
Mhm.
It's just, I guess when you do English literature at university, everyone says, "Oh, you're going to be an English
Mhm.
teacher," and I don't know why. I just thought, no, I don't want to do the most typical thing. So I didn't become a high school English teacher, but in the end, I did become a different type of English teacher, and
Yeah.
absolutely happy with my choice. But I didn't expect it at all. No.
That's yeah. It's often an act of rebellion, which I really like as an idea because teachers are kind of authority figures, and then you end up sort of going like, no, fine, I'll be a teacher. But that's you took a very different route. So as you say, you took the CELTA in Lisbon. Um, just
Yeah.
for our listeners and for people watching, can you tell us about the CELTA course? What it involves? Just for anyone who's not entirely sure.
Yeah, well, it's a 4 week course usually when you do an intensive course, and I think that most people do that. And it's like a first big taster of actually teaching students. I mean, at TEFL.org, you can do weekend taster courses and learn about teaching. But the CELTA course was like the next step where you actually had students. You've got 4 weeks. Each week you learn about a different topic. You'd go home, you'd write lesson plans, you'd make materials, you'd teach the lessons and be observed, which was the scariest thing ever. Even though I'd done a degree, I'd done presentations, I'd been on Erasmus, I'd been to Denmark, but teaching in front of an assessor, teaching a class was really, really frightening the first couple of times. But you're in a group of everyone who feels the same.
Hmm.
So I think I was in a group of about 10 people, lots of British people, some Portuguese, Australian girl, South African guy, and we just got on with it. For in 4 weeks we became pretty good friends, and we got through it. And I think lots of them are still teachers today, so I think it was a good group.
Hmm. So you mentioned there in the 2 years between deciding you didn't want to be a teacher and then doing a CELTA that it was someone that mentioned it to you. What was it that they said, and what sort of changed in that 2 years to make you go from no, definitely not doing this to actually? Was it primarily the travel aspect, or were there other factors?
Yeah, it was mostly travel, to be
Hmm.
honest. Um, I'd met someone who'd been to Portugal, and they said it was amazing, and it is. I went to Lisbon, and it's just such a cool city. So that was the reason for that city choice. But then I knew that I could then travel further afield. I mean, I'd had some friends that I was working with that had done kind of round the world trips. They'd gone to Asia, they'd gone to lots of different countries, and I knew if I wanted to do that, well, I would need money for one, and and they dotted around quite a lot. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to go abroad, I want to spend a bit longer time in one place and get to know it. And then when I met someone else who's a teacher, it kind of dawned on me, oh, okay, actually, that's the way to do that. You are traveling, you're living somewhere else, you get to travel on your holidays outside of teaching. But yeah, it kind of all came together, and and then I found my first job, which was in Vietnam.
Hmm.
Wasn't in Portugal. I could think I'd gone at the wrong time of year to find a job in Portugal, actually, which I realised that looking back, I think I did. I think I did a course in April, but that's the end of the school year, and there weren't that many jobs
Sure.
available there. So I would have to wait until October. So I came back. I think I fell into probably another restaurant job, and then I found a job that started in January, which is a kind of a time when there was more people looking for jobs, like the start of a term, the start of a year. And Vietnam was my first kind of big real job.
Hmm. Well, I mean, that's actually lent itself quite well to the next question. So, the next few years of your career, I mean, it's all fascinating. We're going to cover all of it extensively until we're both very
Okay.
exhausted. But you traveled to Saigon, and you teach there. Firstly, if you could tell me what that was like, because previous guests have told us that Vietnam has a really incredible mix of like forward-thinking culture, and street food and music, but there's also
Yeah.
this kind of deep-rooted historical tradition. Did you find that to be the case? And if not, like how would you? Obviously, it's reductive to sum up an entire country in a couple of sentences, but what was your experience of it?
I mean, I remember I didn't. I hadn't really read that much. I'd read what I could about about going to Ho Chi Minh City, which also gets called Saigon,
Hmm.
but I hadn't really seen many videos. And I'm talking about 2004, which was before YouTube. So to be honest, finding a travel documentary about that place was difficult.
Hmm.
So I'd read a bit and I arrived and wasn't, I was just really shocked but amazed by the big cityness of it all.
Hmm.
Um, I grew up in Edinburgh, I studied in Glasgow. It's not like I'd never been to a big city before, but I arrived at the airport in Saigon and I got a job working for an Australian language school.
Okay.
So I think the head of HR or the recruitment person was coming to meet me at the airport. I was the only new teacher arriving that day, so it was just going to be me. And then he'd take me to my temporary accommodation. So I arrived at the airport, not like any other airport I'd been to before. You stepped out, it's absolutely raw, boiling hot. Um, I get out of customs, and then I'm looking for the person with the sign with my name, and I see it, but he's on a motorbike, and I'm
Right.
thinking, okay, I've got this big backpack. I don't know how I'm going to get on that motorbike. Um, he'd got me a taxi, so that was okay.
Hmm.
But me and the taxi followed him and his motorbike through the busiest city I'd ever seen in my world. I mean,
Hmm.
Saigon is jam packed with a row of 10 motorbikes in a line,
Wow.
always, all the time. It's dusty, crazy, things flying everywhere. There's no At that time there wasn't any such thing as a pavement.
Mm.
You were on the road on the motorbike, or that was it.
Mm.
You couldn't walk along the side of a sidewalk. So I mean, I loved the kind of big city atmosphere of that. But then also, yeah, I agree with what the other guests have said. If you wanted to um, experience a bit of kind of traditional culture, there was places you could go. There's really amazing museums in Saigon. The war museums were just really eye opening. I arrived in January, maybe the first week, and a couple of weeks later was Lunar New Year. So I think I worked 1 week, maybe 2 weeks, and then suddenly we had a week off.
Oh,
And that week was, yeah,
it's
good,
pretty
right?
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the street is filled with people celebrating Lunar New Year and fireworks and lots of things going on. So
Mm.
it was a good month of the year to visit. Uh-huh.
Well,
So yeah, Vietnam is it's got a little bit of everything. It really does.
mhm. I mean, it's by the time this podcast goes out, I'm not going to be able to recommend to my work that we also take Lunar New Year off. But I wish I'd known. I wish I'd known.
Yeah.
So you taught young learners in Vietnam. So what specific challenges did that bring? I mean,
Mm.
were there any specific challenges? What was the funniest thing that happened in the classroom? And I guess like what was your first lesson like as well? Because I mean, that would was that your first lesson in a non kind of assessed environment?
Yeah, yeah. And in Lisbon, I'd been working with, I think, the youngest students in the class were maybe 18, but
Mm,
most people were kind of young professionals, 25 ish. So suddenly I was in a class with 10-year-olds, a class of 5-year-olds. I took the advice of some of the other teachers there, and I took some days before my first class to just observe other people's classes. So everyone was really willing to let you do that, and it's such a good idea. So I sat in the back of a class that was going to be for 6 or 7-year-olds, and to be honest, I didn't know what to expect. And then by the end of the class, I'm up and I'm singing and I'm dancing and I'm doing all the moves, and I realised, oh, okay, this is what it's all about. I need to go to the shop and I need to buy a ball, a squeaky toy. I need to learn some crazy move to a song, and then I'll be absolutely fine. And that was a big switch from the 25-year-olds that I taught in the course. But I mean, really, really good fun.
hmm
And when you teach young learners, you actually might be expected to teach those kind of singing and dancing 6-year-old classes, but then also maybe teach some 15, 16-year-olds that might be kind of going on to do their high school exams. So things can switch really quickly from like dancing and throwing a basketball around the class to then saying goodbye to those students,
hmm
and then the next students walk in, and they're going to listen to a lecture and take notes and then discuss it, and the difference is spectacular, but that makes the day fun.
Yeah, I just I wish we'd had a basketball and some songs in my primary education. It makes it sound quite dire by comparison, but
Right.
oh well. Oh, so after Vietnam, you come back to Scotland to work in PR. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I took a year's contract to Vietnam, and in that year, I managed to go to Cambodia, to Laos, to Malaysia. And
Wow.
so when I finished that year's contract, I thought, okay, I've been on all holidays to all the places I wanted to go. I'll come back and I want to do something else. And I found a PR job. It was really interesting. Um, I mean, in the end, I didn't think there was anything that I know at the start, I didn't think there was anything I'd learned that would help me in the PR job.
hmm
But then I realised, okay, I'm writing,
Yeah.
writing bits of press releases, writing small articles. And kind of when I think back to those 15, 16-year-old classes, I was helping them write university applications for Australian universities. I was helping them learn how to write essays so that they
Mm.
could then go and apply for another university. So I'd learned a lot about writing actually, and that helped a lot. Um, so I settled down into a PR job.
hmm
I was quite happy. Um, I I think until I kind of started looking around at, I don't know why, some TEFL job sites again, and I think a job in Japan caught my eye. I talked to someone else who'd been on a year in Japan, and I thought, Oh, okay. I could do that job. It was a 3-month job. And I thought I could take a 3-month kind of time off and then come back to my job. I didn't have a permanent contract.
Hmm.
So I went to Japan. My boss let me go. That was great. And I did, yeah, just under 3 months in Japan as well. By that time, I was addicted to Asia, you can tell, right?
Yeah, starting to notice a
I
theme.
think it happens.
Yeah,
It happens. It happens. You can get really addicted to Asia.
absolutely.
Japan was really different, though.
Hmm.
It was it was more developed. It had it was a lot more expensive than Vietnam. Vietnam, the wage that we earned was more than enough to survive on. In Japan, you earned a kind of average wage.
Hmm.
But the cities, Tokyo, Osaka, they're absolutely amazing. So,
Hmm.
that was a good experience as well.
Just before we move on to the kind of the next chapter of your career, you talked about bringing skills from the classroom into the PR job. Was there anything that you used
Hmm.
from the world of PR that you actually, going the other way, that you could use in the classroom, if that's not too broad?
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I've never thought about that before. Maybe it gives you confidence. I taught young learners. I was really confident in standing up and kind of doing a Macarena style dance in front of 7-year-olds. But in a PR job, you're phoning adult journalists and going to events and meeting important people. And so I learned to do that. So actually, the job in Japan was a kind of it was an interesting one. It was in a university, and the students were training to be kindergarten and primary teachers.
Right.
So they were university students, and they didn't want they weren't expecting lecturers. They had lecturers in their subjects. They were kind of looking for people who had experience teaching English to that age group and who could teach them the kind of cultural background, the songs and the nursery rhymes and the kind of old fairy tales, and bring those to life for them.
Hmm.
So I did have to kind of have a bit of the poise of I'm working in a university, which yeah, probably the confidence that the PR job taught me helped me do that. And now I can stand in front of a 7-year-old and do a dance, or I can stand in front of a group of 30-year-olds and give a talk.
Yeah.
Um, and no age group phases me anymore.
I've got to. I mean, maybe I'm making a deductive leap here, but it's strange going from being in a classroom observing, the kids singing and dancing, and then having to teach singing and dancing to prospective teachers. That's quite a sort of loop, really.
Yeah, but the best way to teach a group of teachers how to tell a fairy story with actions is to tell them the fairy story with all the actions and do it together.
Yeah.
And so you just ask them, okay, suspend your belief for a moment.
Hmm.
You just pretend you're 7-year-olds. You just clap when I clap. You just blow when I blow, and we'll tell the story together, and then we'll talk about it afterwards and think about what worked and what didn't work. So yeah, it's like learning by doing it, and that's when I go to teaching workshops or anything like that. Then that's how I like to learn as well. It's fun. Teachers want to have fun as well, right? They want to be the student in the classroom sometimes.
For sure, for sure.
Feeling inspired? Fancy trying something completely new? Well, make your best move yet by signing up for a TEFL course with the most highly accredited provider on the planet. Here at the TEFL org, we offer a range of online and classroom courses that you can study at your own pace. All of our courses include top-of-the-range teaching materials and come with dedicated tutor support from experienced and highly qualified TEFL experts. And what's more, we'll give you money off to do it. Just enter the code PODCAST at checkout to get 50% off any of our internationally recognised TEFL courses. And that includes our best-selling 120-hour Premier online course. With that code, you'll not only get 50% off, but you'll also get a free lesson plans pack. Within a matter of months, you could be a qualified TEFL teacher, out there exploring the world or working to your own schedule from home as an online English teacher. Just use the code PODCAST at checkout to get started.
So let's talk about your second return to Scotland in 2007. You were in Glasgow, where I'm based, and you were teaching English to asylum seekers and refugees. Can you tell us a bit about that? And what were the facilities like for teaching vulnerable people on a local level like that?
Yeah, that was a really different job. I mean, as you can tell, I didn't come back to that PR job.
No.
I decided that I was going to stay in teaching, actually. Japan kind of cemented that for me. I found this job working with various people, most of them refugees and asylum seekers, and sometimes the facilities where you were working in a community centre. In the evening after, for example, I was working with a group of Pakistani women who would be able to meet in the evening after the kids had gone to school. They'd given the kids dinner. Then they come at 7 o'clock for a community centre and we'd have a conversation class. Sometimes I would go to workplaces as well. So, when you think of big factories, there's lots and lots of staff from other countries. So it's in the factory's interest to get classes for all the staff. And lots of refugees, when they were given status to be able to work, they'd first apply for kind of low level jobs in big companies. So we go to wherever they worked and do the classes there, which sometimes might be an office. That's fine. You'd be in a back room of an office. But the best place I worked was a biscuit factory.
Yes. Okay, now we're talking.
Yeah, right, right. Do you like Hobnobs?
Oh, please.
Because they.
Were you working?
Right?
Were you working?
Are you hungry now?
Were you working with McVitie's? I don't want to. I mean, other biscuit brands are available. I should say that, but
Yeah. Yeah. And that factory's in the east end of Glasgow. Well, it was 10 years ago. And so some of the students were working on the production line. There were some students who were working in the cleaning department. But to understand what they had to learn, what would help them in their job, I was taking on various tours around the factory. So I got to see hobnobs being made, and I got them to explain to me, which is a great task, right? Explain to me what you're doing, what happens next, when this happens, what happens. And I got amazed but disappointed because, okay, so that all the ingredients go in, they come out on a conveyor belt, the biscuits are all flat, and then a machine comes down and puts the crinkly bits on top of the hobnobs, and suddenly they're hobnobs. And just to see that in real life is the weirdest lesson I've probably ever had. But really great classes. I mean, that's exciting. And I would be wearing like a protective hat and big boots and a kind of like high-vis jacket at the time as well, which you don't expect to be wearing as a teacher. But you kind of would do things that would make an immediate impact on someone's lives. Like, what could you not say today? Tell me, try to explain to me and I help you say it better. Or tell me what you're doing. Okay, that's not quite right. I'll help you make it perfect so that you could then tomorrow say it better. And that was really a really nice job. I loved that a lot.
I'm worried because this is the first episode of the series, and I don't think I'm going to get another biscuit factory anecdote, and that upsets me. But I'm glad we've got one now. So
I hope you do.
Well, see, no, because then it'll be some kind of TEFL industry secret that everyone gets their best work experience at a biscuit factory or something.
And guess what you get as a Christmas present from the students? I mean, like the biggest bag of biscuits you could ever think of.
Amazing. I love it.
Those were good Christmas presents from students. But actually, going way back to Vietnam, I I'd get really interesting presents from students. I get little cards that were beautifully designed, but from a couple of students, the younger classes, I would get things like a toothbrush, toothpaste, a bar of soap, and I think, that I smell bad? What's going on? But they had bought them from like the British or American store,
Oh,
and those were like, oh, we brought you kind of nice, expensive goods from your country. You're like, oh, thank you. So I don't smell then. That's nice.
yeah, it's a bit like that thing. Like whenever you're offered gum, it's a pretext to say that you should absolutely have this chewing gum. But
Yeah.
no,
Hey.
that's very sweet though. That's, um, I mean,
Yeah.
so staying on that kind of topic. A lot of people get into TEFL because they feel they can make a difference for people. You know, having a real, tangible, positive effect on lives, like like you were doing with the employees in the biscuit factory, with refugees, asylum seekers. Um, was it purely about language in all cases, especially when it comes to asylum seekers, or were you working with a refugee advocacy group and signposting towards facilities? Was it more sort of all encompassing than, I don't want to say just language, that's really reductive, but is it a more kind of, are you taking on aspects of like other roles too?
Yeah, I mean, never officially.
Mm,
Those people would always have caseworkers, and occasionally you would write to the caseworker and usually tell them they've made great progress, or sometimes sadly say they haven't been coming to class, what's happening.
hmm
They might have a problem at home. Um, but yeah, more than language, you're being a listener a lot of the time.
yeah.
Um, in the workplace jobs, you're really asking what do you need for your job, but in the community center jobs, you're sometimes the one break out of the family or out of the shared flat that seven Iraqi men are sharing.
hmm
You're sometimes the time out of that environment that people can talk or try to say as much as they can, and for them it's socializing. So for you it becomes that as well.
Yeah.
You're listening to stories, you're sharing things, because if you want to um, help someone talk, you've got to have conversation topics. So your job becomes someone who just draws conversation out of people, and you learn a lot about someone's life when you're the language teacher,
hmm
because you're constantly asking them about themselves and what they've done, and what they want to do. So yeah, you make nice connections with people. I've still got some of those students still live in
Oh,
Scotland. I
cool.
see them on social media, and yeah, it's great to see what's happened to people afterwards.
hmm So actually, just to go, I don't want to say off script a wee bit, but just following on from that, in terms of writing a lesson plan for a class, that's something very different. But if you're coming to these kind of classes, especially in community centres like the ones you mentioned, where for a lot of people it is a bit of respite, it's a chat. Do you go in with the attitude of like, well, I'm going to have a few conversation topics and we'll see what happens and it'll happen organically? Is it like very different? I mean, obviously it's very different to a school setting, but what's the key difference there?
Yeah, sometimes it is like, all right, okay, everyone studied a bit about how to talk about the past.
hmm
So you've got a topic, you've got a grammar point that they've learned, but then you just want to get people to talk, to practice talking about their lives. So things can veer off into different areas. Or you might have gone in with a kind of topic like, let's talk about, in a very basic level, like making a doctor's appointment.
Sure.
You've thought in your head, you've written down kind of various sentences that you might need to say to the receptionist and the doctor and the nurse, um, and you set up a role play and you play that. But it might go anywhere. The students might then want to say, actually, I need some help because I'm going to the dentist and I don't know what to say, or I don't know how to get the bus there. Can you explain the thing that I say to so that they don't look at me like, what, to get that bus ticket? You end up explaining things about the city that you live in a lot,
Sure.
because buying a bus ticket is not the same if you live in London, if you live in Glasgow.
hmm
They need to know the specific words of what to ask for to get the best deal, to get the day ticket, and yeah. Yeah, you go off topic. You do whatever is needed. That's the thing. But you
Mm.
have a plan.
Yeah.
Um, but then you go with what people need to do.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I just thinking there about, even if English is your native language, the difference getting a bus between Glasgow and London is incredible. I
Right?
remember my first time in London. I didn't really know where I was going, so I asked the bus driver if he could help me out, and he's just like, "You haven't got a clue, mate. You haven't got a clue." And I was just like, "Well, that's why I'm asking. You're a bus driver," but it didn't go down well.
Yeah.
Sometimes I still don't really know what I'm
Yeah.
doing on the
Can
bus,
happen to
but
anyone.
exactly, exactly. So
You got to know the phrases, what to say, right?
Yeah, it's a whole. It is like you need a script, you know. Anyway, I'm going to veer wildly away from that because there's another topic I really want to get to. So Scotland can contain your talents, and it wasn't long until you're on the road again.
Oh.
This time to Bilbao, where, if I'm right, that's where you live now.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, after lots of years of teaching, I realized, oh, I'm a language teacher, but I've never really mastered a language,
Sure.
and that was a kind of thing like, oh, I'm a little bit ashamed about that. I want to do something about that, and I've been dabbling in learning Spanish for a while. I'd learned a bit of Vietnamese
Hmm.
in a year in Vietnam,
Sure.
but not much. But so I wanted to go and try to kind of prove to myself that I could learn a language to a high level. So I came to Spain, and that was 11 years ago, and I'm still here. I'm in the north in Bilbao.
Hmm.
It's the Basque country. So I did come to learn Spanish, but there also is another language
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Don't ask me if I've mastered that yet because I haven't, but I'm trying.
See, I just base it off footballers' names. That's the closest I can get to learning Spanish. I am trying now. El hombre, there we go. But no, I write about Spain.
Cool.
Think
See, go with what you know.
exactly the man.
Go with what you're interested in. You'll learn. Yeah.
I'll arrive in Madrid airport and just go, the man, the man.
Are you looking for a weekly guide to what's going on in the TEFL world? Do you want some advice on everything from job interviews to underrated TEFL destinations? Well, the TEFL.org blog has it all. Every single week, we tackle some of the biggest questions in the TEFL industry. Stay up to date with the latest trends in English teaching, find tips to make your next job application your best yet, or get inspired and read about the experiences of TEFL.org graduates teaching all around the world. Whether you're brand new to the industry or you've seen it all, we can guarantee an interesting read each week. To find out more, go to tefl.org/blog. That's tefl.org/blog.
So yeah, I mean, I write about Spain a lot for the job that I do. I mention all the time how distinct the different regions of Spain are. So for listeners who have never been, how would you describe the Basque region, especially in comparison to other parts of Spain? I mean, for one thing, as you've mentioned there, the language is very distinct.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely separate language. Basque is older than Spanish. It's not connected to any other Romance language, so it's completely separate.
Mhm.
So kids at school learn mainly in Basque, but they all speak Spanish because that's the bigger language for TV and music and films and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, but the region it's like we're halfway between Spain and France. It's got bits of both cultures. It's not as hot as the south of France.
Right.
I'm Scottish, and this climate is green and lush, but that means rain and a bit cold. But
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. There isn't uh, like there's things like the fiestas in the summer. They still have them up here. That's all the same, but they have lots of different other traditional days that they wouldn't have in the south of Spain. And yeah, some people have likened the Basque Country to Scotland or Ireland a little bit. It's part of a bigger country, but it's got a lot kind of older traditions, some kind of Celtic pagan behind it, and yeah, it's really interesting, and it's beautiful as well. The rain gives you lush mountains, and the coast is beautiful with lots less tourists than other areas of Spain. It's got surf. It's a nice place to be, which is why I stayed, obviously.
You mentioned to me before we started recording, um, you know, since 2012 or since 2012-ish, you moved to Bilbao. You took up sort of teacher training courses, master's degrees. What happened at this point? Let's go circle back to where your career is at this point. And what
Mm.
inspired you to take that sort of academic route? I mean, had you seen enough from teaching to believe that you could help in sort of shaping the process?
Yeah, I started working with TEFL.org
Oh,
and doing the the introduction courses for people that had no teaching experience in Edinburgh and Glasgow.
mhm,
And I realised, like, actually by accident or by kind of no design, I'd had experience with young learners in a university, with adults, with refugees, with people that want to enter university exams. And it kind of was the whole spectrum. And I thought, oh, well, actually maybe yeah, I can help quite a lot of people with this, different experiences to talk to people about. And so when I came here and started teaching, there were opportunities for teacher training. So I took all those opportunities. I took every offer that there was. I mean, I was teaching for a big company, and the big company here would had offices all over the world. So sometimes they'd hold a conference and they'd ask for speakers, and I'd put my hand straight up. Um, Sometimes they'd ask for someone to write materials that would then be used in all their different schools, and I'd put my hand straight up. And sometimes they'd say, okay, we want someone to train the new teachers that are coming in. So every year there would be some new teachers, and again, I put my hand straight up. So I took kind of all these opportunities just to see what happened. And yeah, and now I kind of do a mix of all of those things. I write materials, I work with new teachers, I train teachers who have been working for years but just want refreshers or want new ideas. And yeah, I kind of wrapped all those things together.
amazing.
Sorry.
That's all right. So you're developing those teacher training skills, and you end up delivering courses in Beijing and Bangkok with the TEFL work.
Mm.
How informative an experience is that for you? Because even though you've got all this experience, like, did something kind of change when you went to Beijing and Bangkok? Did that inspire a sort of new level of confidence? Can you just talk us through that process?
Yeah, you get the Bangkok course actually was with TEFL.org, and so it was a kind of a return to Asia, which I
Hmm.
was really excited about.
Yeah.
Um, Bangkok is absolutely amazing. For me, it was a mix between Tokyo and Saigon. It
Right.
had all the kind of modernness that Saigon didn't have. But still, if you wanted, you could go down a back street and find a temple and all those nice things that that Saigon did have. Um, and then there I was working with people who were going to do the very first teaching job. So
Right.
they were uh, really nervous. They were the people that were about to be in front of the 8-year-olds and play a crazy vocabulary game. And I just kind of fell back in love with, like, oh, okay. So I remember how it felt when you didn't have that experience, and now I'd worked so. And by that time, I'd worked so long that I kind of had lots of tricks of how to work when things went wrong, work when your materials just didn't turn up, or I don't know. Suddenly, you felt nervous, or the class was bigger or smaller than what you expected,
Hmm.
and just giving advice to people and kind of going through activities that I used to do made me think, yeah, I think I like this. It is teaching. It's
Hmm.
just another form of teaching. And by that time, I was kind of thinking about doing a master's, reading a bit more about methodology and language, and so I had that kind of backbone to things as well, understanding not just what worked, but actually why it worked, and it was nice to put that together. And then the course in Beijing was with teachers that were Chinese, that were from there, who were going to go on to be teachers as well. And yeah, just both those experiences made me think, okay, I like working with maybe teachers from my own background who want to teach for the first time, but I also like working with teachers from that country who are preparing to teach English in their own country.
Mhm.
And I do a bit of both now. And now I work a lot online since the pandemic. That's something that's happened a lot more. But actually, it's great. Now I'm connecting with teachers in, let's think, this morning I connected online with a group of teachers in Jordan. And then I
Right.
wrote lots of emails to teachers in Kazakhstan. And then I listened to kind of little presentations from some teachers in Palestine. And now my day is filled with people from different countries. I'm not traveling there,
Mhm.
but I get the feeling and I get to know a bit about the countries, and I get to help them just with the ideas and the experience that I've had, and help them kind of come together and help each other as well, because teachers talking together is the best way to figure out problems. Uh-huh.
Definitely. Actually, you kind of stole my question a wee bit there because I was going to ask
Oh,
you,
sorry.
not how you weren't to know, you weren't to know. But your work is taking you to conferences in Algeria, France. You mentioned Jordan, Kazakhstan, and also you're talking about working with other teachers. So, how important would you say networking is with other teachers from around the globe? And what advice would you give to prospective or even new TEFL teachers in terms of networking?
Oh yeah, definitely do as much as you can. Put your hand up for everything. Join every group. Uh, I mean, one of just the best way to learn new activities is to ask another teacher what worked
Mhm.
and how it worked. And yeah, really. There's so many social media groups that you can join where you can meet teachers from all over. Um, most if you're in even a medium-sized city, look online and find out if there is like a teacher association or teacher conference. The word conference sounds scary at first, right? If you've never been to a conference, you wonder, okay, am I just gonna have to go to sit there and a pen and write notes and
Aye.
ask intelligent questions? But sometimes a TEFL teacher conference is someone at the front saying, "Hey, okay, I've got this cool new activity. Have you used Siri in your classroom? Everyone get out their phones. We're going to ask Siri something. We're going to find out what they say. We're going to brainstorm we can use Siri in our classes." And you end up being a student in a class, and it's good fun. So yeah, as much networking as you can. A really nice thing I've done over recent years, and something I've talked about at conferences, is networking to find teachers who want to be kind of a pen pal class for your students.
Okay.
And it can be pen pal, like bits of paper, or it can be classes meeting on on a video platform, or classes sending WhatsApp audios to each other, asking each other questions. And I've had really nice experiences where my class here in Spain of 12-year-olds have interviewed a class in Kuwait about
Wow.
what they're doing at the weekend. And
That's so cool.
I've spoken, yeah, I've had teachers in Spain talking to teachers in Kazakhstan about how they handle noisy classes. And yeah, I mean, things like that are real communication, and it's really, really fun. It's really, really great. So networking can take you so many places, and that's just one example of how you can kind of circle back and bring it back into your class. And it's cool to meet other teachers as well. Yeah.
So talking about building up experience and building a network around you, we'll go back to 2015 when you did even more teacher training and work in CLIL. Can you explain what that is to our
Oh,
listeners? Because it's not there are so many acronyms within the industry, but that might be
yeah.
one of the lesser known ones.
Yeah. So it stands for Content and Language Integrated Learning,
Okay.
but don't worry about remembering that. It is, for example, here in Spain and in lots of countries in Europe, there's an English language teacher in every school. There might be an English language assistant in different schools. I've done that job before as well. And probably there's a couple of other teachers that are teaching their subject in English. So I was working in a school where the biology teacher had really great English. So she was teaching biology in English. The PE teacher was teaching some of his PE classes in English.
Okay.
Because when you add up that English from lots of different directions, that was really giving the kids a kind of rounded experience of English. So some schools here have bilingual or trilingual programs. But imagine you're a teacher, you've grown up in Spain, your English is amazing, but taking that step from teaching your history class in Spanish or Basque and then suddenly teaching your history class in English
Yeah.
is a big step. And so usually the English teacher or the English assistant in the school will help out, give training, give tips, because yeah, it's a big step for the teacher, and the kids are dealing with things that they don't normally talk about in English, but they get really motivated because they can do science experiments in English suddenly after a term, and that's just a different experience with the language. So that's another direction. I mean, if somebody, I did study English at university, but if somebody studied sociology or studied chemistry, then after teaching TEFL for a few years, I mean, another option is to then teach chemistry in English and kind of combine the two things together. I've seen a few people do that recently, and that's a great idea.
We've actually had another guest on who also worked in Vietnam, who said that they were teaching biology classes in sometimes in English
Okay.
and that kind of thing. So it seems to be an approach that's gaining momentum worldwide, or at least
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Students at higher levels, it's a really interesting thing for them to do.
Absolutely, and it seems like it must work as well. So nowadays, your work is, in your own words, 50% textbook writing, 50% teacher training online.
Yeah.
So compare kind of what you're doing now to the person who started out in TEFL, sort of doing their CELTA in Lisbon. How does it feel to be sort of on the other side? I mean, obviously you got like you got a foot in both camps there, but you're kind of you're helping to shape the learning experience for other people. How does that contrast to all the teaching that you've done before? Does it feel a bit? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I really like writing materials, and I think now I'm getting paid for it, but I've done it for years, and I think
Okay.
lots of people, even in their first year of teaching, you've got a textbook or you might be given worksheets and games, but you're always changing them a little. And I'm just a lucky person that now gets paid to to change those and to make those and um, to write those little domino vocabulary games, or to write the find someone who activity, or just to write a reading text in a higher level textbook, or read a really interesting article online, and I'll think, okay, I'm going to make that simpler so that students could understand it, then write the comprehension questions. And it's like planning a class that you never actually get to teach.
Right. Okay.
So I mean, sometimes I do some private classes still because I like teaching, and I use the materials that I've made for publishers, because otherwise, yeah, you've planned this beautiful class, but then you don't actually take it to the classroom. So yeah, the materials side of things I like, and that just seemed like a natural thing to get into. And I've always just kept on doing teacher trainings. So yeah, to have a balance between those two are good. But I do still teach some private classes with some teenage students, because if not, I think I would miss that. Yeah, that's a that's the bit of teaching that I've still kept, and I don't think I'll give that up.
No, I was going to get onto that actually. You still do English lessons online. And how important is it for you to still be doing that from the perspective of someone who's writing a lot of the material and shaping curricula? Have there been moments when you tried something out from say a draft of a textbook chapter, like a lesson plan,
Mm.
and you've gone back and changed it based on how it worked in real life, or have there been things that you picked up in the lesson and thought, "There's a better way of doing that. I'm going to put it in a textbook," for example?
Yeah, definitely all the time you go and even though you're working with Word documents, rip up the document and think that's rubbish. That didn't work at all. Or your students give you cool ideas for games that you hadn't thought of, and you go home and write that up. So yeah, that happens a lot, and I think it definitely should. I don't think I'd like to be just writing materials and never ever using them. That would be strange.
Mm.
At the moment, I'm teaching some refugees that are in Scotland, some Ukrainian refugees,
Okay.
and they've made me think a lot about some of the materials that have topics that I've written that should be avoided, and
Mm.
things come up and there's too many questions that are asking personal things about family, which is just normal things to talk about in a language class, but might be hurtful at that moment.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of making me think about what to avoid and what might not really suit everyone. So yeah, you learn little lessons like that from your students as well.
Mm-hmm.
And teenagers teach you about cool new stuff that I didn't know because I'm much older than that now. So I'll ask my teenage students, all right, I got to write an article about a pop group for a textbook. You got to tell me what's cool because otherwise I'll sound too old. And they'll give me the newest bands, and I'll okay, write that down, and then I'll go home and I'll type up my article about it, and then hopefully next 6 months there'll be other people doing that reading comprehension about that band, and they fingers crossed won't be past it by then. So
Well, yes,
yeah,
I was thinking if
yeah, right.
if it was the 90s, that band would have probably split up by the time you'd written your text phase. So,
Yeah. No, things can get published online now. It's okay.
yeah, of course, that's very true. Shows how old I am. I didn't think of the internet there. That's yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've even seen people that write materials that are published straight away online on social media. I
Mhm.
saw a worksheet last night about instructions of how to do the Wednesday dance. And I'm like, oh damn, I should have thought of that. But next week it'll be too late because it'll be gone. So yeah, teachers have got to stay up because students want to talk about what they've seen online last night, and because that's what they're into. So
See, now you're catching me out because is that like Wednesday Adams?
of course, of
Right.
course.
Okay.
But by the time this podcast goes out, that dance won't be cool anymore. But
I don't know. I mean, we don't have any association with the makers of that particular program, but we're doing them a little favor here. I think that's fine. I just ask for our address if you want to send anything. So let's. I honestly I could chat to you about this all these different topics all day. I really could, but I'm gonna finish up by. It's not quick fire. Last series, I tried to say, "Oh, this will be quick fire, and we'll do these things really rapidly," but it doesn't work like that. So take
okay,
as long as you need, honestly.
okay.
But you ever worked in or given conferences in so many places and taught in some fantastic locales. So annoying hypothetical question: if you could do classroom teaching in any of the places that you've been for a year, money and visas no object, obviously. Where would you go and why?
Okay, I think I go back to Tokyo.
Cool,
Yeah,
cool.
I don't think Tokyo can ever disappoint. It's always going to be cool. It's
Hmm.
always going to have something weird, and yeah, the students are great. They're really cool.
Hmm.
I'd go back there.
See, that was actually quite quick fire. So now you kind of caught me on the back foot. Oh, well, because there's a lot of interest in Japan. Obviously, the JET program is something that you can read about on TEFL.org. But
Mm.
yeah, I think it remains one of the most popular places. Certainly, our students talk about Japan an awful lot. So, without trying to sound like this is your life, another really modern reference there. Your story, I would say, is one of drive, one of willingness to learn more, being adaptable to a range of opportunities. But do you ever look back and go, "Wow, I actually did that," or put it another way, when did you feel like you'd sort of like made it, so to speak, as a TEFL teacher, as someone with, clout in the TEFL industry?
That thing I said about like putting your hand up and saying yes to all the conferences and things like that. One conference I went to was spectacular. It was in Jordan, and the hotel and the conference center was on the God, I've just forgotten the name. On the Red Sea, and so that the right sea. I think it is.
Let's say yeah.
So we're like, let's say yeah. The Dead Sea. Oh my God,
They
the
rhyme.
Dead Sea.
They rhyme.
That's right.
It's fine.
And so I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to this conference center. It sounds interesting. And you drive up there and it's absolutely beautiful. You can go and swim in the sea, in the background, float in the salty water. And then on our day off, we went to Petra to kind of do a little bit of Indiana Jonesing. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm getting paid for this.
Yeah.
This is really, really, really amazing. The work that you put in beforehand is a lot, and this is your weekend. But I mean, I'd go back and spend my weekend there for a job anytime, and those type of things. You realize, like, yeah, this is a good choice of career. I'm into this.
Excellent. That's such a good example. That's so good. So
But
we
the Dead
asked,
Sea, not the Red Sea.
if I was any good at geography, I would have a different job. So I'm not going to be the one. I'm not going to be the one to correct you. I can tell you where the football stadiums are in France, but like that's the extent of my geographical knowledge. So when we ask every guest, because we get a lot of really good answers to this, so no pressure at all. But what advice would you give to someone who's listening or they're watching this and they're interested in teaching English, but they just haven't quite signed themselves up yet? They haven't quite committed yet. What would you tell them to sort of push them over the edge?
I'd say just go, because it doesn't have to be forever. Because the first time that I went, okay, I had done a course in Portugal, but when I went to Vietnam, I really thought I might do 6 months of the contract. In the end, I did the full year contract, and then apparently I was done. But we know that I wasn't really done.
Yeah.
So being worried about going away for 6 months or a year, don't be worried about it. Just go, because you can come back when that's done. Nothing will have changed when you get back home, because in the scheme of things, 6 months or even a year isn't much. But you'll have had a completely different adventure. And even if you finish there, it's fine. You had an amazing year's adventure, but you never know. You might be in Bilbao 18 years later on a podcast talking about weird places you've been. So just try it. It can be a forever career, or it can be a 1 year job. Let's try it out. If you don't like it, that's okay. But I haven't met many people who quit after a couple of months. Most people get to a place and stick it out for a while. They do.
I would agree with most of that, but I would like to point out that talking to me on the internet is not an incentive for anyone to pick a particular career. I'll just get that.
This is aspirational. It is.
Melissa's words, not mine. Not mine.
I might put the biscuit factory and tour as number one on my hit list, but being on a podcast is pretty cool as well.
Well, we try our best. We try our best. And so, just to round things off, what piece of advice do you wish that you'd been given before you started your career in TEFL?
Oh, I'm not sure about that one. I think I would have taken language learning a little bit seriously. I did a bit of Vietnamese lessons when I went. When I got to Vietnam, I learned a little tiny bit beforehand. But the people that stayed longer, and maybe the people that maybe got a bit more out of the local culture, were the people who went a bit more seriously into learning the language. And that's something later down the line that I regretted a little bit, and then tried to kind of rectify by going full on into Spanish, which I now speak fluently. So yeah, think about learning a bit of the language at least before you go to to kind of open up doors of who you can meet when you get there. I would definitely do that a little bit differently.
Fantastic. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Melissa. Thanks so much for talking to me. Where can people
Yeah.
find you to keep up to date with all things Melissa Thomson?
You can find me on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a profile there as an ELT author, and I like asking questions there. Like this morning, I'm asking like people, okay, can you tell me how to use chatbots in the classroom? I haven't tried it yet. Anyone get any ideas? So I love to talk to people about any new thing that they've got in teaching there. So yeah, look me up.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much. And I'll need to get you booked back on here because there's a lot I still want to ask about. So, but no, Melissa
Let's do
Thomson,
it again.
absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
You've been listening to I Taught English Abroad, a podcast series by the TEFL Org. To keep up to date with every episode, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your streaming platform of choice. And we love feedback, so feel free to leave us a review on any platform you like. For more information about the TEFL Org, or about teaching English as a foreign language in general, head on over to tefl.org. That's tefl.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.